So somatic tracing. So yeah, somatic meaning of is something that means of the body. And I use that too because, for example, with there's a movement training called somatics, where it's very much about getting in touch with your natural movements and organic movements, and it's called somatics. So I'm calling this particular presentation somatic tracing, and this is a talk that I gave at the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art. So a lot of the talk, the first part of the talk is going to be about some of my previous work. And then the second part is going to actually focus a lot on the work that I did at the museum, because this talk was given for that particular work. And yeah, Hyung-Yi or anybody, feel free to stop if you have questions or don't know what a word means or need clarification. So I will, with the image, so let's make sure, can you see, you can see the snow and the image?
Yes.
You see everything.
Yeah,
so this is a work that I did in Chicago, right? Because there's a lot of snow. And I'm showing this work in terms of thinking about, right, the connection between movement and the visual, right? Visual arts and performance. And in this case, right, I'm drawing with the body, and the drawing itself is connected to right, natural elements. It's ephemeral, meaning it's not lasting. The snow will melt and the drawing will disappear. So I'm showing this as kind of an example of a work that thinks about the interdisciplinary aspects. And it's also traces, right? It's called somatic traces. So thinking about how the body is tracing, creating lines. And then this is a work where this is a performance work where I actually did a performative lecture about Rose Kanehiro and the work I did with Milad in Taiwan. And this is Linda. I don't know if you remember Linda, but she was a performer that we worked at. And this is a space of Seongye in Taiwan that we performed. So I'm projecting it on my body, thinking about these ideas of memory and how the body holds memories for this particular work. And then here we have, I said, Buto, which is a Japanese contemporary dance form. And this is my teacher, Ima Tenko, who I met in Japan, in Kyoto, where I studied and was in a dance company for 3 years. She's an amazing performer. And it was during that time that when I was joined her company, here's an image. I think this is where we were last, right? Mm-hmm. So this is myself performing in one of her pieces. As you can see, we're in a traditional theater. With her company, we painted our bodies white, had extravagant costumes. And I was drawn to Buto in terms of its connection, its movement that's not necessarily normal dance in terms of, it's very much about improvisation and movement and emotion and ideas of storytelling. And for me, that connected a lot to my training at New York University in terms of where I did physical theater and thinking about how the body can express different stories and emotions. And I found this in this dance form. It was also a way for me to connect with my own heritage in terms of my mother being from Japan. Next section, performance painting and family history. And so after Japan, I went to Bali, Indonesia, where I was in a painting residency. So like I said before, I have this interdisciplinary art practice where I work in performance, dance, painting, sound, video. And here I am at a ceremony doing a live painting at a ceremony that I felt inspired to do. But this is when I started to wash my paintings and thinking about gestural painting. So these movements, this painting was very much connected to the gesture of my body, of what I just saw the dancers do, And I was interested in how mark making, right, gestures and how they leave marks, paint. I also started washing the paintings, both because I saw in Bali that washing was this ritual of cleansing in terms of, right, making a new start, being able to purify things. And that was also something that I saw in Japan a lot as well. So I started to also wash my paintings. And I'm talking about this, a lot of these things I'm talking about, as I said before, I'm talking about my previous work, but I'm also building up to my most current work. And so after Bali, Indonesia, I went to the Chicago Art Institute of Chicago, School of the Art Institute of Chicago. That's where I met Milad Mozari. And I focused in performance, where I got my graduate degree. And there was a lot of really amazing people I got to study with. And I started to think about, continue to think about the kind of blending integration of these various mediums of drawing, of performance. And as you see here in this particular piece, I'm giving a lecture, something that is called a performative lecture. Means it's a lecture, but is also artistic. It's also an art piece too. It's not just an academic lecture. And throughout the performance, I am doing live drawing. So this is a piece called Highways that I worked on there. And then after graduating from grad school, like so many artists, I had to figure out initially how to make a living. So I started waitressing. And at first, I found this very hard to do, something I didn't have much experience with. I had lived abroad, being able to paint, be in a dance company, and here I was in the States waitressing. And at that time, I started researching my family, on my mother's side. And my great-grandfather, my mother's father's father, actually immigrated from Okinawa, from Japan to Hawaii it was his dream to be a waiter. And so this particular piece, and the first job he did was as a pineapple farmer. So that's why I have a pineapple on my head. I'm thinking about the farming that he did. And the work, this particular work, Suchi, looks at my own experience of waitressing and also of going to Japan and coming back, connected to family history of my great-grandfather coming to the United States. So that was a work, that was the work that I did. And through that, I started to then get artist residencies and touring grants. And so I was able to show this work in various places. Here you see there was drawings that I projected that were connected to a lot of the ideas of the work. Another work that I'm sharing is Out in Naka. And so thinking about family history, once I started to think about family history, a lot of my work started to come from my family stories, which I found wasn't only about my family, but how my family stories represents larger ideas. So this particular piece, Out in Naka, was about my grandmother, my mother's mother, who was in Japan during World War II, and how her house was taken and she had to go live out in the countryside. And so that's this image here in terms of shadows, ideas of family, shadows of nature, of war, and thinking about how ancestors are held in my body. What are the healing qualities of nature? And this particular work was presented in theaters, but also here it is at the Indianapolis Museum of Art, where it was presented as a performance installation with sculpture elements, as you see, the suitcases, the nest, ideas of home, plates. And The next thing, which is I think Milad will talk more about this work. So I'm just going to, right, Milad, you're going to talk about this work a little bit. So I'm just going to briefly touch upon this from
a little bit, and I'll show the video if there's time.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So I'm just going to touch upon this work. So this is, and and also, yeah, Milad will get more into kind of our work in Taiwan as well. So I'm just touching briefly upon some of that work, but continuing with this idea of family histories, my great-grandfather on my mom's side, Rosa Kanehiro, was a well-known botanist. And so Milad and I went to Taiwan and we started to think about plants and architecture and sound and movement. And in this particular piece, we brought that back to Chicago, where a lot of those questions about plants and imperialism and how I was, in my particular way, Milad was interested in, we had different interests, but also similar interest was, of course, thinking about movement. And in this particular image, we're thinking of the fern. And there's a fern, if you see in the back, called the fiddlehead, which kind of goes like this. I'm sure you've seen it, right? It kind of spirals. And the dancers are imitating that and looking into that spiraling, both in their hands and then later into their full body in terms of movement. And this idea of plants as connected to movement is something that I continue to think about in the work, as well as ideas of sight and performance, where performance and art is being displayed. So this is the next work. This is called Orchid, continuing with this idea of plants and movement. And so thinking about Orchid Island, right, which is off the coast of Taiwan, I started, and Rosa Kanehiro, my great-grandfather, worked there. And so I was interested in that, also my grandmother's love of orchid. And then through researching and studying about orchids, I realized there are all these things that it's connected to. It's connected to the environment. There's a lot of endangered orchids, connected to feminism, right? Connected to ideas of growth, of rest. So I started to think about how all of this was connected to other ideas. And so, yes, a lot here. So this was a piece that I did outside, a solo performance work connected to orchids. It was done outside in part because of the pandemic initially, right? Because we weren't doing performances inside. And this was a work that took numerous years to make because of the pandemic. But I think having it outside, because it's about orchids now I only want to perform this work outside because I think that's what so much the work is about. And here I am, right, looking at the growth movements, the movements of orchids. Here, I'm like an orchid grows off of things. So I'm showing that kind of movement in there. And as you can see, my shirt is the same color as that orchid. Next work that which was also created during the pandemic, which you're going to see the video of, is called Desert Turtle. And this was made through a residency at Rogers Art Loft in the Mojave, which is in the desert of the Mojave Desert, is connected to Utah, and it's connected to California. And my mother, again, family history, she migrated from Japan to California, to the Mojave Desert. So I became very interested in this, and I drove out to the Mojave Desert, to nearby where she migrated, and created a film work with my friend Amelia, who filmed this, and because it was during the pandemic, right? We both had to quarantine and test, and then it was only her and I in the middle of nowhere filming, and we did this, right in the middle of the pandemic. So we made this film, and part of the film, what it's about is, yes, my mother's family history, but also this idea of the desert landscape, right? If you've seen it, especially in Utah, it's beautiful. And we often think about how beautiful the desert is. But what's not always thought about is all these histories and these negative things that have happened in the desert, such as nuclear testing, which happened in the Mojave Desert, right? Japanese internment, which is if you don't know, during World War II, Japanese Americans were brought into these barracks, these places that they couldn't leave, and had to leave their homes and live in these places because they were thought of enemies. And also the idea of a lot of these lands originally belonged to indigenous communities in the United States and were taken. So all of these complex histories of this beautiful desert and how it's layered with these other histories and family history. So you'll see this video later on. It's about a 30-minute video work, and you'll see that later on. It was also presented at the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art with Kiku, my sound collaborator for this, who we did a performative version of the work because song and music is a large part of it. There was video projected in the background, there was singing, there was talking. He was playing different musical elements that was done. So it's both a video and a performative work. And now, so I'm assuming I can just keep talking, right, Milad?
It's delightful to see this. Yes, of course.
Okay.
Unless Hungy has any objections.
No. I didn't even know that you have done so many things. That's
She's been so busy during the pandemic.
Yes, I didn't have any other work, so I was making lots of work by myself.
But they were excellent. I didn't know.
She's the most prolific pandemic artist I have met. Yeah. Sorry, I'll let you talk.
So the rest of the talk, like I said, this talk, I shared it at the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art, which is Utah, which is where Milad and I have been for the last few years. But now I'm in Boston. We're moving to Boston. So, I mean, in and out for its transitional year. But so this work is connected to the work that I did in the museum. So I'm going to the rest of the talk is connected to that particular work, which is, so railroads. So interesting, in case, I'm sure I didn't know this history, so that the Transcontinental Railroad, which is the railroad that was built around the turn of the century, it went from Omaha, Nebraska to Sacramento, California. And it was a big deal. It was this idea of, okay, this is modernization. People are able to, move cross country. And what struck me was I went to the library, the University, Utah Library, and I found out that both Japanese Americans helped maintain the railroad and Chinese built a lot of the railroad. So here we have some historical figures that were important in Salt Lake in terms of building the railroad. Here we have the Chinese railroad workers. So this continues with some of these ideas I already had, right, in terms of labor, work, right, and immigrant labor, as I talked about my family history in terms of my great-grandfather as a waiter. Also thinking about the landscape again and the Utah beautiful landscape, but what are all these histories or stories that are not told? So I became interested in researching it. So I started to research primarily the Chinese who built it was primarily Chinese and Irish who built the railroads, and then Japanese Americans who maintained it after the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, where Chinese were not allowed into the United States, and then Japanese started to maintain and build the railroad. And a big part of the work, which I thought about, here we have Utah, when the railroad were on the two sides from Omaha, Nebraska, and Sacramento, California, and they met in Utah, right? They met in Utah, and here it's called the Golden Spike. And they took a picture of this moment where the railroad was finished and was completed. And if you look at this photo, you'll notice none of the Chinese who did a lot of the work and the most dangerous aspects of the work were not included in this picture. And I found that very disturbing. I wanted to think about why that happened and how to share. It was important for me to share the history of who actually helped to build the railroads. I read this book called Alien Capital, which looks at larger ideas of Asian invisible labor in Canada and the United States. So here we have, right, the Chinese workers with their faces blurred out, this idea of invisibility. So I started to think about questions of invisible Asian labor in my own experience, as well as kind of larger issues connected to the railroad and also what's happening now. This is an amazing book, Kathy Park Hung, who really talked about the Asian American experience and this idea of disappearance. And so these were all the kind of things going into the project. Here, I went to the Golden Spike with my sound collaborator, Kiku, where we collected sound recordings. Here is some archival video that I used for research in terms of the Transcontinental Railroad. And so, yeah, so this idea of, right, I became interested in aspects of, you can see in terms, ooh, it's not working, let's see, in terms of movement, right? The railroad as a sense of movement. I was interested in movement. I was interested in the various labor, and I was interested in these stories, is kind of things that I wanted to bring to this piece. And one of the things that really struck me and I started to make work about is the Chinese. One of the things that they had to do was there was the Sierra Nevadas mountains. And in order for the railroad to go through them, there had to be dynamite that blasted through them. Very, very dangerous work, right? This dynamite. And so let me see if I can show any of that. So I started thinking about that and using that as inspiration for some of the paintings that I then did. So again, thinking about this idea of explosion, I thought about these explosions of these stories, but also cleansing, the washing of the paintings that I did in Bali, started to wash them, thinking about cleansing these histories. So doing these abstract paintings, they're quite large, quite gestural, right? Movement, they're big, they're like 6 feet tall, very much. And then here we have soil, the brown and the yellow are soil collected from areas along the Golden Spike, along the railroad. So yes, here are some paintings about that. And here is a book that really inspired me too, called Emergent Strategy, where I wanted to think about not only this negative history, right, these painful histories, but how can we reimagine that? How can we think of these things as opportunities and possibilities and speak to the now? And part of that was, let me fast forward a little bit. wanted to so I made these paintings mobile, quite a number, but I put wheels on them so they could be moved, like the railroad is moved. Here I have the laundromat cart and a flower because my grandmother on my mom's side worked at a laundromat, right? And thinking of that as invisible labor, right? We get our clothes cleaned, but we don't always know how they got cleaned or who does it. And that kind of work. But she also loved ikebana, flowers. So I kind of put that as a tribute. I started to work with other Asian American performers in Salt Lake, and that really opened up the work. We talked about these ideas, and the objects and the performance was very much connected to their own stories, their family histories, as well as their own interests in terms of the railroads. So the paintings existed as an installation, but also, which is here, this is the installation in terms of the soup spoons, the microphone that is used in the performance, those structure with wheels, the paintings. Right here is another, the soil collected, but it's also 3 times it was performed throughout the exhibition as well, where the performers and myself would activate the works as well and would thinking about a number of these ideas. So that's a little bit about the work I've been creating, and I hope you see some connections. I'm sure maybe you can't understand everything, but hopefully you understand some things. Yeah, so that's the presentation. I'm going to turn it off from presenter mode. Stop sharing. Great. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
My question is, you talk about the Sierra Nevada,
Yes.
the railroad, yeah. But
The
we
what?
went
Say
to
again?
Sierra Nevada, the
Oh,
mountains.
yes. Yes.
So they want to go through the mountain with the tunnel.
Yeah.
Did they make it?
Yes.
How thick is it? So the mountain?
Very thick. I don't know, but I know it's, like
Kilometers, more than many kilometers.
I mean, I think it's, I don't know. It was hard. It was miles, I think,
Miles.
like.
Okay.
I don't know kilometers.
But in that time, it must be very difficult because it's 19th century.
Yeah, so they used nitroglycerin, and they had to, and it was very dangerous. Like there's stories of people being lowered from a mountain in a basket.
Yes.
And lighting the dynamite, and then like being lifted up quickly. And just and so people would die doing this.
Sure.
Right? People would die, and it was only the Chinese who were doing this very dangerous work. Nobody else was doing this work.
But until 1882.
Yeah. The 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Yeah.
So so this was around like this was probably a little bit before that.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was, before the turn of the century that they were doing this. So it was very dangerous work, very hard work, but it couldn't have been done without that, right? You can't build over those mountains. You had to go through them.
Mm-hmm. But there's another question. You talk about the ikebana, the flower arrangement of Japanese ikebana. Do you have other work with the idea of ikebana? Because I adore that, the ikebana. You do the ikebana too.
No, but I will now.
Not yet. Yeah.
Not yet, but it's coming up. I think that it's very simple. It was just, but ikebana can be very simple. But my grandmother, she practiced that. So I'm not a specialist. I didn't study it. So I just use that as a symbol for her.
My mother was a professor, teacher of ikebana.
What?
My mother.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's some simple one. But I have an idea. Could you next time you come to Taiwan with a performance like this? When I find the budget, I know a French artist. He go to the mountainside and he chuck some wood, make some chalk. I mean, kind of carbon, and then he with the chalk he paint on I think it's canvas. No, it's some kind of some structure, textile structure. He paint on it.
Wow.
He just stay there for a couple of days, and he make the chalk by himself, and he paint on the same press. It's just like a dancing. I hope you can.
That sounds beautiful. Yeah, I want to see that or meet them. Yeah.
But he did it only in France. Maybe I could invite him to come to Taiwan, and then maybe you can have some work together with him or something.
Oh, that sounds
would
amazing.
be marvelous.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
I only see one of your performance in Zhongye.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know that you had so many things, especially in that one in Chicago. That's marvelous. That's excellent.
You.
Smart. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
What is next for you, Mitzu Salmon? What is next for you professionally or creatively, or however you want to answer that?
Well, as you know, so I'm going to be doing the work, continuing with the work we kind of did at the Chicago Botanical Gardens, as well as ideas of plants and movements.
Yes.
So I'm doing a work next summer. I received a grant to continue working with those performers that I started with at the museum, the Asian American performers, and to do that connected to plant movement in a public park over the summer in Utah, in Salt Lake. So that's the next artistic thing. And other than that, it's just moving to Boston and starting a new job. So, yeah.
But Utah is so pretty. Utah, even the picture of more than 100 years ago.
Yeah, it is really beautiful.
It's a very dramatically beautiful place.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic. Taiwan is beautiful in a very different way. Yeah.
Now I have my secret garden already, just nearby, just in Wutai always. You must come next time when you come to Taiwan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We're counting the years, man. Yeah.
Just beside the house of the mayor.
Right.
About 2-3 kilometers away, and then in the mountainside, there's a tree. The trees there are all planted by a group with me. You might come here. You should come here.
We're gonna try.
Okay. Oh yeah, we want to. We have to
We're
figure out.
by winter.
Yeah, we're hoping during our winter break we can come if as long as the pandemic continues.
Okay, and the quarantine. The quarantine is too complicated.
Yeah,
yes.
It makes it hard to during your break to come.
Mm-hmm.
So, but for everybody on this call, we a big part of who we are as artists is because of the time we've spent in Tainan specifically, and the time we've had the incredible fortune of working with Hyungi.
Yes.
So it's a big part of who we are as artists.
Yes, yes, definitely.
We have a colleague last year. He went to Korea and back to Taiwan for 4 times. It means that he stayed in the isolated hotel for 2 months.
2 weeks. 2 months.
Oh, 2 months.
Yeah, because of
4
the
times.
back and forth.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So.
Wow, that's dedication.
I was mad at the 3 PCR tests I had to take to come to Korea. Somebody has a
question already.
Okay.
I'll let her speak. 蔡佩如，你有问题要问吗？ She left something on the board.
In the chat. Yeah. I see the text, but it's in a language I can't decipher.
I take a look.
I think it says something about the days of the week. That's all I think.
Okay. I'm going to translate her question.
Okay.
Thank you for your sharing. I would like to ask the professor. To learn the Japanese traditional. I don't know how to say. The drama, Japanese drama, with the movement very slowly.
Buto is the dance form?
Not Buto. Buto. I think Buto is kind of dance, but it's a drama. There's a theater.
Are you kabuki or no?
No. I think no.
No, it's very old.
She's talking now.
那个我发现我上面好像打错了，应该不是能剧，就是老师刚刚在那个他有一段里面
对，有舞蹈的，对
有舞蹈的那个部分，我想要询问的是关于老师在过去的经验，就是比如说，因为他有说到他跟那个很 amazing 的老师学习那个舞蹈的部分，我想要比较针对就是学习传统技术上面跟创新之间怎么样去取得一个平衡，然后来做一个发问这样子。好，谢谢。
我帮你翻译一下，谢谢。I think it's known, and she saw that you make a performance with the known, and then you create it as a contemporary form of presentation. And she said she also is a sculptor. She learned the traditional sculpture, but she want to make it sustainable for a long time and give a new meaning in the contemporary context. She just asked how do you say, what do you do to make this traditional and creation balance? The question.
Make it what?
To find a balance between traditional technique and the creation, contemporary creation.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so I guess to clarify, Buto, the Japanese dance form that I didn't have to innovate with that because the dance form itself, they had all the questions. This was started in the 1960s. So, like 15 years after World War II, 10, 15 years. And so those dance makers had a lot of questions. They didn't want to be westernized, right? But they were still inspired by the West, especially this woman, Mary Wigman. But they also, same thing, they didn't want to be completely traditional Japanese either. But they still wanted to draw from that, right? So it's this interesting thing of, I don't want to be westernized, but I also don't want to be Japan that started World War II, right? So how do I kind of work with both? And so that was a big question. I mean, there's many questions in Buto, but that's why that particular dance form is done right in a no theater. There were traditional elements. They were still drawing from elements of traditional Japanese theater. But they needed to make it new because they didn't agree with what Japan had done, right? So does that make sense? So that I didn't innovate in terms of that. The dance form itself, they were already beginning to, those were the questions being asked in the 1960s. So yeah, but that's a great question in terms of in terms of traditional and contemporary, from what I've seen in terms of other artists who work who do work in traditional Japanese dance like Nihon Buyo, or I have a friend who works in Bharatanatyam, which is Indian traditional dance. There's a lot of artists who have that training, right? Like maybe have the student has this training, and then they ask questions about the now, right? Like this artist who's a friend of mine who does Bharatanatyam, she starts to question the art form. Why is it only done for royals or aristocrats? What does that mean in terms of being a wealthy migrant in her experience? And what does that mean so it's these contemporary questions, but she's still using that art form. And I guess for me, Buto isn't particularly traditional. I mean, it still draws from, but I draw from Buto, but I don't say my work is only Buto, but that's my training and I use it as a tool. If that kind of answers the question a little bit.
Okay. Thank you. I'll translate to her.
That's a lot. Sorry. I'm sorry.
我需要翻译吗？
老师，我大概可以理解，然后就是我因为我自己的经验也蛮像的，然后我其实也在厘清说，就是我自己自身的这种传统的学习跟其他人的这种传统的表现到底有什么样的不一样，甚至是我还不够，因为我还在学习的阶段，还不够足以到发展成是真正是一个当代艺术创作的作品的一个状态，所以我其实会很开心的看到，就是老师有这样子，就是有点前辈在前面先做这样的一个示范的一个概念，谢谢。
好。She said I don't need to translate for her, but she answered something. She said that she's learning one traditional craft art. I think it was 那个佩如席怎么讲？席英文怎么讲？席的英文怎么讲？你是那个tin. It's tin. I think it's a metal. No, it's a metal element.
It's kind of metal.
Yeah, I think it's for some worship craft in the temples. And she's learning art with a very famous family in Lugang. Lugang is a small city with a very many traditional craftsmen. But she's just wondering, could she be something different, but don't put away the traditional dance?
Yeah.
So that's what she's thinking. I think that almost the same thing like you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think that's I always enjoy art that has those questions of the traditional and contemporary, and there's lots of artists who are thinking about those things. And yeah, that sounds great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
有没有其他的问题? I think that would be good for your talk.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, Milad, did you figure out the sound thing?
Apparently, Google Meets it automatically plays the sound.
Oh wow! Okay,
we will see if that is the case or not.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm gonna rely on my Google search as the empirical evidence behind it. But yeah, no, I can go if you like. Hungy, do you need a break or can we keep going?
Okay, but Mitzu, so your part is totally finished already.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be here for Milad's, and then if there's any questions after Milad's talk, I'll be here. What?
You can go to sleep now.
Yeah, after Milad's talk, I'll go to sleep. But I want to hear his talk, and if anyone has questions for either of us after his talk, I'll be here.
Okay. Thank you much.
So I'm not going.
Yeah, this is really this is really nice because we're both so busy. We don't get to see each other's talks. So this is opportunity for us to see each other's talks in the last 2 years. Yeah, like we have, like, wow, she's done such beautiful work. But do we have? Does Nikita Hung have a question?
Yeah, Nikita have a question. I think there's the student Nikita have a question. 那个 Nikita 那个龚云慧。你有问题吗？你可以问一下问题。
Yes, this is Ying Hui. Yeah, and I'm so great. I have the experience to hear Professor Mitzu's speech now because I am very interested about your family history because I have read about the history about the 1942 the Japanese American in Utah campus history. So I now as Taiwanese have a connection between the original people and Taiwanese maybe come from the China or the original here born in Taiwanese history. So we have tried to find some connection about our artwork. So in the other side, I am interesting about you choose some iconic like pineapple, ultra flower, and I have seen a spoon object in your performance or your connection with your painting. So maybe how does you choose the iconic like pineapple or flower?
Orchid
why
flower.
And why? Yeah, ultra fly.
Orchid flowers. Yeah.
Orchid flower or pineapple. Why? And have another iconic that you choose to your performance. That's my question now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's lovely questions. So the question is, how do I choose these iconic things to make work about, like the orchid?
Yeah, orchid and pineapple.
I think like the specific objects in your performance. If I'm understanding. Like, why do you choose the specific objects?
Like the spoons or I think each one is a different story. Like there's meaning behind each one, but you know, just like I think about symbols, right? And how an object or an image symbolizes something greater. So the orchid is something beautiful, but it's connected to, it's a symbol for many things, right? It's for my family in terms of Orchid Island, in terms of the environment, right? In terms of beauty, right? So it has all these symbols, and the pineapple also with my great-grandfather being a pineapple farmer, right? And all these thoughts about like, it also represents a crown because in Hawaii, the Queen Lilikulani, her crown was taken from her so that the United States could be, Hawaii could be part of the United States. So, and then, yeah, the spoons were the performer. I didn't come up with that. One of the performers, she thought about this idea of her family. When she thinks about her family, she thinks about like eating soup or eating the like with her family and these particular spoons, and how that represents like family to her, going to these restaurants. So each one is a different story, but I guess I think about the symbolic nature of them. What do they represent? What do they evoke? And maybe what it means to me might be something slightly different to somebody else who has a different connection with that object. And I'm very open to that. I always like to hear, you know, what does the spoons mean to you? Or what does the pineapple mean to you too? I'm open to, because it is such strong objects and symbols. But yeah, lovely question. Thank you so much.
I'd like to add something about Nikita. Nikita, she is a very important artist of craftsmanship in Taiwan with the metal material. And some of her work present also the same orchid you use. I think that's the orchid, I think amabilis, the Latin name, amabilis.
Phalaenopsis, yeah, that's,
from Taiwan.
Oh, yes, yeah, because, and I think about Orchid Island, right? There was wild orchids.
That's from Orchid Island.
Orchid, exactly. Yeah, because, oh yes, exactly. So the line from the Philippines to Taiwan,
to
Orchid
Taiwan,
Island. And so, yeah, my great-grandfather, Rozo Kanehira, he was researching those particular orchids. So that's why I use that orchid, but also it's a very popular orchid, right?
Yeah.
And I was interested in why is that popular, and why are the other orchids not being, you know, used in terms of, and I found out it's because a lot of times they're cloned. They're easy to clone, and that's why they're so cheap. And a lot of the other orchids are. So yeah, so that's so great that Nikita also has used. I feel like we could probably speak
but
about.
But the one you use, the orchid as a blue or violet color, purple color, the one you use in your performance, the colors.
The fuchsia one, the Phalaenopsis.
In your performance, I mean the orchid in your performance.
Yes, there's multiple orchids.
Multiple. It's not only one color. Okay.
There's not just one color, but that one matches with the shirt. So yeah, the Phalaenopsis. It's I forgot the exact name, but I can look it up. But it's a Phalaenopsis.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for your answer, and thank you for the question. So, 佩如你还有问题吗？蔡佩如，你是有新的问题吗？还是这是刚才的东西？没有。哦，好。Okay, I think it's okay now. Any other questions? 有没有谁还有问题？Okay, thank you again.
Okay. I will start by thanking Hungy for inviting us to give this opportunity. It's been a challenging few years since the pandemic, because Taiwan was our second home, and we haven't been in 3 years. So having the opportunity to share with you all what we've done and getting your questions gives us a slight window into what our lives were like before the pandemic. So thank you for holding this space. I'm going to go ahead and share here. You should see it shortly.
It works very well.
It works well?
Of view. Yeah, clear.
Okay. And I am going to not be looking at the Google Meet browser. So if you have any questions, please just go ahead and speak. So thank you, Hangi, for inviting us again. My name is Milad Mozari. I'm Mitzu, Salmon's collaborator. The talk I'm going to give today is takes the shape of this title, Field of View, which comes from traditional wording around photography or lenses in terms of how much you can see in the scope of an actual lens. For the talk itself, it's broken down into 3 sections. I will go ahead and start with my background in terms of influences, as well as personal history. Personal history, meaning in terms of where I come from, and then influences, artists I really like, and their specific lives throughout the world, either being local or in the diaspora. And then I'll talk about some past projects that I've done in Chicago, as well as abroad, that involve music history alongside technology. And then current work or current research, I'll start with Mount Shama, which was connected to Taiwan, and I don't necessarily see it finished. So I'm putting that in the current section and talk about what we've done. And Mitzu, if you want to jump in at that point, please do so. And then I'll talk about 2 current projects that I'm working on in Salt Lake City, having to do with my translation of being in Salt Lake. And the last one ending with this photo on the right, which is a microphone at the Nancy Holt Sun Tunnels. And that one is the In Particulates project. But at any point, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm fairly casual of a guy. Yeah, so I'll start with this, a little bit about me. So my name is Milad Mozari. I am originally from Iran, but I've lived in the United States for the past 27 years. And I've traveled abroad to Taiwan and Korea, where I'm at right now, for the majority of my 30s. And it shapes who I am a lot as well. The video we're looking at right now is a 127 camera system that takes all these photos at the same time and then projects a noise pattern onto you to get a 3D model for you. So this is what's called photogrammetry. And what I really like about this model, that it speaks particularly to how I think about projects, which is wanting to look at the subject and wanting to look at the technology you're using in different ways, because you'll get different things from the different perspectives of it. In terms of influences for me, I'm a big sound nerd or music nerd. And given the fact that I have a background from Iran, from the Middle East, it's a mixture of new music and old music. So traditional and heavily technological based. And for me, 2 big influences are Max Matthews, who's the gentleman on the left, and then Dariush Dolat-Shahi on the right. Max Matthews was a computer scientist and musician who worked at Bell Labs in the 1960s, and then went on to create instruments like we see here, where he's playing his radio baton. Let me see. And then he's got a Schoenberg actual score on his music staff stand. And he went on to create what's a software called Max MSP, or the open source version of it is Pure Data, which is a graphical user interface way of connecting objects to make experimental music or electronic music or computer music, amongst other things. So he has a wonderful legacy that is well known. Dariush Dolat-Shahi is an Iranian electronic/computer music musician who was in Iran and studied at Columbia right up to 1979, and then recorded 1 or 2 albums after the fact, but then disappeared because of his geographical background from being from Iran. So an amazing musician and also a graphic artist. And nobody really knows where he is. The last I've heard is that he's just living in Paris, but he doesn't have the fortune of leaving a legacy in the same way, nor does he make a lot of work anymore. But the relationship between these two musicians informs who I am as well, in terms of how technology could potentially be utilized by both, but given your background, you may be able to have a legacy connected to it, or it could have a longevity connected to it. But in other instances, it's a very small interaction, and it might not be of use to you long-term without your own agency. So the sustainability of technology for me is a big factor, and working with that. And specifically, sustainability of technology and culture connected to one another. So the first project, I started this in graduate school, but it's ongoing. I did a performance of it in Taipei, I think right after graduate school in 2013, which was really wonderful. This is a rendering of a prototype of the device. So what you have here is the project is called Study for Santur. So it's started as a prototyping study for a project that uses an Arduino with an audio shield on top of it, connected to handles here, where essentially what's happening is that you are mimicking the hammer dulcimer electronically in the process, meaning that you can actually fine-tune the instrument digitally, more specifically over the internet. And that had to do with the original tradition of this instrument, where when you have a teacher and a student, there's a method of what's called sine ba sine, or chest to chest, where the tuning is done usually through an oral tradition, and the teaching of the repertoires and the music itself are done through a chest to chest or an oral process. And around 2017 or 2018, before the pandemic, I wanted to convey that oral tradition via telepresence or via internet, working with a santur or dulcimer teacher in Germany. I was in America as well as Hong Kong at the time, but it was a matter of figuring out how can you actually tune the instrument and perform with your teacher, in a sense, from a distance, because they talk about there's different elements of tuning, and then there's also rooms have different tones to them, in a sense. So I'll play that in a second. But the research that went into the prototype that you saw originally was really starting out with doing preliminary sketches or diagrammatic drawings of the fundamental frequencies of the actual notes of the instrument themselves, their placement here, where they would go on that, and then actually mimicking that digitally through Max MSP, where you have starting out with simple sine waves at those frequencies that can actually be controlled by the other person in the room, or in the other room, I should say. So this was to do that. And then in connection to that, what you can have is through microphones, the pitches or the notes of these adjust based on the other person's instrument or tuning system. So I will play a short excerpt of that. So this is from Chicago Cultural Center. Is there sound?
Yes, but it's very quiet.
Oh, so it works in Google. Okay, so I'll play this first.
Yeah, you can hear it.
It's quiet at first.
Could you make it louder? But because the sound's not.
It will get louder. That's why the subtitles.
Okay.
Okay. And yeah, so what in performance that really turned out to, and as you might have heard it over the internet, which is kind of a part of it, is that there's this process of kind of like wrestling between the notes, between the two rooms, and then it comes to a calm place in the process over time where, as you saw of the close-up of the Zoom between the two performers, the instruments essentially come together. They're tuned harmoniously and can work together. So that was really a study. The project itself, it was a performance, but it was also a study for the instrument, and in some ways the preservation of the instrument, the santur or the dulcimer, digitally. How can you do that digitally given the diaspora? How do you do that with the displacement of individuals? So I'll leave it there for that. The next project was a project done in Chicago as well. And this was my thesis work in Chicago called The Iron Rod, which essentially took a piece of music from a religion in America, the Mormon faith, or the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints religion, one of their hymns, and changed it over 3 sections through performers in a moving taxi in Chicago. So this was at the time before car services like Uber or Lyft had taken off, but taxis were in decline. So there was this empty capital space as well as this dying service that felt like an opportunity space to perform in. So the music itself changes from the Mormon hymn in the first section And then given my personal background, adding aspects of Persian music, similar to the study for Santur, to the original score. So you have the fundamental note, and then you actually have ornamental notes connected to those for the second section. And then in the third section, having the original hymn or the Mormon hymn taken out, and you just only hear ornate sounds or the ornamental notes themselves. And there was a lot of parallels between the two music systems being written or transcribed at the same time in different places in the world, in Iran and in the United States. And one of many interesting factors between the two were the fact that they are made to be types of music for solo improvisation, meaning that one person only performs it at first, and then other people can come and join the improvisation. And for the giving a sense of space for this, it felt appropriate for that accompaniment, or the person who joins the actual music is the voice of the taxi driver, as well as the train system above in Chicago. And the reason I have these two photographs is that the photo on the right is one of the performers, Marta, and then Shabi Ahmed, who is the taxi driver. This photo here is where the camera looks, and here is where the performer sees. So Marta actually took this photo where you see the actual musical notes here taped up, and then the camera is there, and then you have two light sources underneath. So this goes back to the looking at multiple perspectives, and I'm always really interested in seeing the different perspectives within a project itself. So I will play an excerpt in 1 second. And what we did for this project is that not only did we make a video from it, but we also hired the taxi to do concerts in for one night in Chicago, where Shabi would drive around, Marta would perform, and then audience would hold the music there. So that it would be about a 15-minute piece where they would get to listen to the music, but also participate in the context of the project itself. So yeah, so here is an excerpt.
Okay. But where are the audience? The audience are in the music hall, or sorry,
I'm sorry, is somebody speaking?
Yeah, that's me.
Yes.
Where are the audience when the taxi is in Chicago and the performer about in the same taxi?
Same taxi. So there's like 2 or 3 people at each taxi ride, and the taxi would come pick up audience, take them on ride,
yes,
and then drop them off, and next audience would go.
So every time there's only one audience.
2 to 3.
Okay.
So there was a line for performance.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, just to clarify, the audience sits in opposing chairs to the viewer, as well as the passenger front seat, and then they get to do it, and they get to be driven around, and then they get dropped off at gallery, and then the next audience members join.
Splendid to meet you. What do you need to do? You have to go pay them? How much is it going to be? You got to pay them 100. No problem.
with this project, a thing that came about in the process too, and with all the footage, because I thought it would be a very clean, just capture performance project of the music, but the conversations became really important, and the moments that were essentially in preparation between takes became much more of an interesting aspect of the project themselves, not necessarily solely as the only thing, but definitely essentially on another axis, creating a dynamic to the project itself. And that was an important precedence to me in terms of how music works, in terms of how music is conveyed, or the conversations around music that come around seem to infiltrate this project as well. So that was the project that I did around 2013. And then I really started appreciating the spaces music inhabits, and the more further the notion of practice. So in Chicago, after I graduated, I stumbled upon this building that actually Marta, the performer of the last project, she had a practice studio in this building called the Studebaker building. And that's where the next project, Standing Nymph and Man, took place, or the Fine Arts Building and the Studebaker Theater. And the name of the project comes from a painting inside the building that nobody knows who made, and it's not finished, but it's installed on the 10th floor of the building. But the building itself has a long history connected to Chicago, in particular in terms of music, as well as people like Frank Lloyd Wright had a studio here. And it was originally built as an 8-floor building, and then it was renovated to 2 floors more. So there's 10 floors. And there's a theater in the first floor that's like a concert hall that takes up 3 floors. The building passed through many ownership, and the blueprints of the building were actually lost because they were connected to Al Capone, the famous gangster. And at the time I was teaching in an architecture building. So this is the Studebaker Theater in the building in Chicago that this project takes place in. And the blueprints were gone, and this theater itself, where a lot of performances of wonderful music had taken place, was abandoned because of water damage from one of the previous owners. So me, with a small team in Chicago, went in and started doing 3D scan, 3D modeling essentially of the ceiling of this theater inside the building. And this was something that allowed me access to make my next work. And this is where also I was able to meet with a lot of the people in the building who work there. So similar to Shabi, who was the taxi driver, I was able to connect to the people who are everyday workers in the building itself in the process of this. And as I was doing this, the management of the company, of the building, asked me if I want to do preservation work. So we rented some 3D scanning equipment, which is mainly done for surveying places. And we started 3D scanning the entire building. And in the process of that, I become more and more close with the actual staff of the building, and was really taken back by the cleaning lady of the building, who had all of the history of the building and with her, because she had been there for 30 years. So what I really wanted to do was figure out a way of doing the work for what I was hired to do with the building, which was do essentially historical preservation work, like so, of actually fabricating new parts for the ceiling inside the building to happen. But also somehow, how do I actually take this digital technology, but also not lose the sense of its oral history that the cleaning lady has? So after having essentially 2 hard drives, one hard drive for my hired work and one hard drive, 1 terabyte for my personal work, the 2 hard drives essentially started getting messy and together, where I started pairing the interviews I had done with the cleaning lady with the 3D models. And the 3D models at the end, we actually have the entire building 3D modeled, as well as the surrounding area with LiDAR scans. I'm not sure if, but a LiDAR scanner essentially takes the 3D model for you very quickly in about 6 minutes. So it was about pairing that up for historical preservation work with Barbara's voice, the cleaning lady. So I'm going to play an excerpt of this, and then I will play the movie later on. That is LiDAR as well as video. So this is a quick excerpt from Standing Nymph and Man.
On the night when we've had that blizzard, when the cars were stuck on the Lakeshore Drive, I was all night long in this building. Every possible door was shaking and some of the windows broke. But I was still here, and I understood that the building will keep me safe. I couldn't go home that night. And so that's what this building is about. And I work here very many nights. I worked probably 18 years at night when I was by myself on the floor, and I was never afraid.
So essentially, the project follows through Barbara's voice throughout the building and the elevator operators to tell you about the different places of the space. The building itself has a lot of ghost stories as well, and then the 3D models essentially became ghosts of the building itself too, meaning that you're not necessarily just preserving, but also using the technology to talk about the more nuanced or the more perspective or subjective views of the building that is very old. Since doing this project that took about 3 years to do the historical preservation and the movie, Barbara has retired, and the theater has reopened. So we were able to do thousands of the actual prototypes. So like taking essentially this fragment that we 3D scanned and making thousands of feet on CNCs to be installed on the ceiling, which are there now, as well as doing scans of little medallions like that from here, and then fabricating hundreds of feet of this that you see essentially. I don't know if you can see it here, but the medallions are here, and then the hundreds of feet are here. So it's all installed in the building now, and I'm really proud of the fact that I was able to do something that has a sense of permanence that's both tangible and physical, like the preservation work, as well as intangible, like Barbara's stories connected to the building itself. So, field of view, and the title of today's talk. So for me, this is the crux of, I believe, Mitzu, you can disagree if you like, but it's kind of like really looking at your surrounding and seeing all different perspectives that you can. For me, it has to do with connection of sound and, say, 3D scanning. So with 3D scanning, it basically captures a 360 space. And so do many microphones in different shapes. So we have the pickup pattern of an omnidirectional microphone here. And that's very similar to a 3D scanner that actually shoots a laser and spins around to capture a 3D model for you. And for me, these two tools, sound recording and 3D scanning, are based on Cartesian principles of essentially working with the same form of geometry. But what I think is really important to me is the cultural, the social aspects connected to this technology. So it's not about what you see, but who also sees it back and tells you about their experience in that space. Mitzu, agree or disagree?
Yes. That
Okay.
Sounds...
Okay. we're still collaborators then. Good.
Well, Mitzu is still awake.
Mitzu still, I would hope so.
Sorry, just kidding.
Yeah. So, but yes, so that for me is a big factor of using the technology to essentially help people. That's a big part of where I'm at, or at least bringing awareness to things. So, and that brings me up to current research or semi-current research. So Mount Shamo is a project that Mitzu, Salmon, and I worked on. This is a glass plate from the Taiwan Forestry Research Institute in Taipei that Hungyi knows very well. And this actually has Mitsu's great-grandfather inside of it, which is this gentleman here, Ryozo Kanehira. And Mitzu, who is this again? I forget. Wilson, right?
Wilson, yeah. Yes.
Yes. So I really, this photo for me from Taiwan is a very important photo because it's a glass plate that I took an iPhone photo of, and it has layers of people connected to it. So Hungry, correct me if I'm wrong, but these gentlemen in the army suits are actually botanists, but the botanists were issued military uniforms back then in the process. Then we also have the botanist and expeditionist Wilson here, as well as some individuals from the indigenous tribe. I really appreciate this photo, given the fact that it's an early photograph document as well, meaning that people don't necessarily, depending on who they are, the technology is new. So nobody really knows how to look at the camera and the fact that it's aged in a particular way. So this photo stays with me for, this is one of my favorite photos of all time, I would say, because it has a lot of anchors. So with Mount Shamo, it takes us to this experimental use of technology in Taiwan, similar to how architecture in Taiwan, a lot of Japanese came to Taiwan during colonial period and did a lot of experimental work in as well. That's something that takes precedence in terms of how I approach technology. To continue with that Taiwan Forestry Research Institute, we were fortunate enough to look at some of not new tools, but old tools at the Taiwan Forestry Research Institute, such as the slingshot, or this here is the microscope. This is a plant press here, and this is to cut leaves from tall trees. And this is not necessarily too different in terms of measurements in how things were done in Chicago. This is from the Lincoln Park Conservatory in Chicago, where they would just measure flowers very simply by a yardstick, right? So these tools of measurement were a big part of our work that we did in Taiwan on my end. So Mitzu is much more of the family history and the performance aspect. I'm constantly looking at the tools and who they interact with. Our very first time in Taiwan, we worked in Zhongye in Mado, and we did a performance in the chief's house, which you see the blueprint or the layout, the top view of here. And this is Mitzu and I performing in 2017, 18, I believe.
I think it's 18.
18, the first time we met Hungyi. And this performance was really wonderful. So this is a 360 video documentation of the performance, where we went about it both towards the gestural as well as the analytical of the space. So Mitzu being the gestural element, and me being the more analytical, doing essentially like structural tests of checking the beams, and then recording the sounds of those to be reverberant for Mitzu to perform in within the space. And then I'm back here. But Mitzu is going around the audience, and this is essentially in this room of the chief's residence. And then the the performance scales up, where the windows are open here. The sound becomes more expansive in the process. Mitzu actually goes outside and performs, so it becomes a stage. You can barely see her there as it goes. So the space is connecting to the nearby trees that her great-grandfather named some of. And then
and counting, cataloging, and collecting, selecting.
Yeah, so so that was the first instance for us in Zhongye and Mado in particular, where all those elements of sound in terms of oral tradition and space and what the technology is looking at is essentially reoccurring for this project with the collaboration with Mitzu. And we were fortunate enough, shortly before actually a year before the pandemic, in 2019, we were invited to come back for the Mado Sugar Arts Triennial to do another performance. And instinctively we chose the chief's house again. So this photo is from the outside of the same building. I'm sure some of you have been to Mado or Zhongye more than we have, but this was working with local performers to set up a choreography that moves through the park and connects to the same aspects of family history and movement in terms of connected to plant growth, but also playing with space in the process. And this was for the Mado Sugar Arts Triennial. And we were fortunate enough to have a research or a cultivating period that we were able to work with dancers, where Mitzu did the choreography, I was working on the sound, but also at the same time, kind of having a departure point in terms of research that I wanted to do in Taiwan, which included looking at sensors. So in the process of actually working in Mado, we were fortunate enough to be connected to, later on, the Rukai tribe, but also the Shiraya tribe. And we spoke to some of the leadership there. And I was really interested in environmental microcontrollers, where you can actually look at soil moisture, humidity, temperature, and whatnot. And these are, there's a few of these, but this is the schematic of one called the LoRa, which could actually send it over long-range radio. And what you essentially get is you get a timestamp, you get a temperature here, you get the humidity level, the barometric pressure and temperature, soil value, and the device ID. So you can get these remote sensing capabilities that were, in some parts of Taiwan, could be of use. Specifically, thanks to the person who brought this lecture together, Hangi Chen, we were able to meet with the mayor of the Rukai tribe. His name is what again, Hangi?
Du Zhengji.
Incredibly sweet guy. He reminds me of an uncle I have too. Same smile, same outfits. And we were able to plant one of these controllers on his farm. And the way this works is that it's over LTE or cellular network, where it sends that data remotely for someone who can actually check their garden. So in this instance, the garden is near his home, but in some instances, from what we understand of Taiwan, some farms are very far away from the person's home. And in this process, you can check the actual temperature and humidity and soil value remotely. So you don't have to go through sometimes dilapidated infrastructure to actually go ahead and take care of your farm. So therefore, you have a more profitable gain as a small scale farmer. And the Taiwan Research Forestry Institute told us that there's a big difference between agriculture and farming. And a lot of people farm, but they don't have the same technology given to them in the process that agriculture has, similar to these microcontrollers, which are ubiquitous in large-scale agriculture. So with this microcontroller in Mado, I was able to place it and do measurements where all the blue dots are here, right? These are where all the microcontrollers were in Mado. And with mapping or GIS software, we were able to interpolate where good soil moisture is and where it's more dry soil moisture. So this is something that could be done in live time as well as analytically over periods of time, say over a month span or over a year, to get data from the land that you have in the process. So this remote sensing was really to work with the communities in Taiwan and have that be the benefit to them. The sensor there is, I'm sure it's somewhere on the property still, and we're hoping to be able to come back in Taiwan to continue both the performance work as well as providing tools to the indigenous community that Hangi has been incredibly kind enough to connect us with since. Any questions at that point? Because this one's a local project and I don't want to miss any.
You know, the mayor, Mr. Chu, is going to finish his term in the end of the year.
Yes, it's a shame.
November, yeah, November. We are not sure who will be the next mayor, so do come earlier.
We're trying. We're definitely
Okay,
trying
okay.
to. Yeah. So this is current research because it's I've become more interested in this technology since, and this is a project I've been working with in terms of, I'm gonna actually how are we doing time if I go 20 more minutes, Hangi, and then do videos for an hour?
That's good. That's good.
Okay. So the technology for me is something that I've been doing for a while. And the next project, the technology itself, started in Hong Kong around 2015 with a grant through the Asian Cultural Council of doing sound workshops with in the Tok Wah Wan community, which was the last area in Hong Kong that did not have a train system. So doing sound workshops with them. And these sound workshops went back to America with me of working with refugees. So this photo was taken probably like a month before the Mado Sugar Arts Triennial, where I started doing sound workshops with the International Rescue Committee's youth, where we just look at different microphones and how they could use it as a way of storytelling. So similar to Mitzu in terms of being interested in storytelling, I'm very much interested in that storytelling, but also taking on less of a creative role and perhaps more of a facilitative role with marginalized communities, such as the refugees in Utah. And this workshop, we started doing it in 2018, late 2018, early 2019. And it was something that I've continued on now that I'm a professor in the School of Architecture in Utah, working specifically around technology workshops with refugees. It's been happening for the last 3 years now. So what we do now is we bring refugees to the University of Utah who have arrived for maybe less than a month to a maximum of 6 months in the United States since arrival. And what we do with them is we show them different tools such as sound, and now because of what they express interest in, doing virtual reality. The interesting thing about the photo here on the right, so this one is one big workshop we did at the library in the fall of 2021 with the refugees as well as students, as well as former refugees who are project collaborators. The photo on the right, though, is a recently arrived refugee named Justin. He's from the Democratic Republic of Congo, but he doesn't speak English, but we wanted to introduce virtual reality to him. And we did not have a translator, but there are amazing apps or applications now like Tarjimli. So you can actually get a live translator, human translator, who is a volunteer at any time through this app called Tarjimli. And you can communicate in, say, Kinyarwanda or Swahili to a refugee and talk about them. So in this instance, what we have is actually Justin is experiencing virtual reality for the first time, and we're getting feedback from him through the translator on the phone of like, how do you like it and stuff like that, and just getting a more fluid communication rather than just gesture like thumbs up, thumbs down. The IRC clients or the refugees that I've worked with mentioned virtual reality being a very useful tool for them, because a lot of them are very scared in America when they first arrive, in particular of leaving their homes because they don't know the language, they don't know how to get different things like go to the grocery store and things like that. And also a lot of them have trauma. So the trauma of coming from war, coming to a new environment, you don't feel any more safe. So we wanted to, in my teaching and in my research, how to create virtual reality for refugees. So in the past year, we've actually created about 10 videos where we take 2 meetings when new refugees come, and they get to watch virtual reality on their own devices of how to take the bus, how to go grocery shopping, how to do laundry. And this is that bypass of this uses the same technology of the 360 video that I showed you. Mitzu and I were in Zhongye, but it works off your phone where you can actually rotate and see different things. And this essentially helps in the process of the clients not having to leave their home, but also with refugees, more and more people are becoming refugees, and there's not enough humans to help them. Videos are a big help for them on weekends at their home. They can learn on their own, and also they have better understanding of digital literacy. We do this on a weekly basis with new refugees, where we show them these videos at the IRC office, which is the resettlement agency, with my students. And up to this point, we've had about 70 to 100 students and refugees work together since the pandemic to actually work to learn how to use virtual reality. The thing on the right is the headset that we're using that uses actually recycled plastic. So recycled plastic mixed with turmeric, which is a spice. So there are machines that you can make your own, essentially 3D printing filament from recycled materials. And this turmeric headset has a familiar smell for some of the refugees. And it also creates a sense of, as one of my students puts it, Mia, a sense of integration rather than assimilation within the United States. Because a lot of times people from outside come to the United States and they are essentially trained to be foreigner and work, as Mitzu alluded to, or Mitzu stated in her presentation. And refugees are essentially another iteration of that imported labor that the United States has. And I mean, I'm here in Korea, and it has a very similar feel as well in terms of the immigrant and refugee community here. So we wanted to create a physical object that would essentially would not feel, or a platform, a physical object and the video that bypasses that notion of imported labor, and it gives agency or freedom to the refugees once they arrive. So they don't feel like they have to just get job working in, for example, in a factory, but they can learn, they can do things quickly on their own, and then also show them videos on how to go hiking, how to go to the park, which is something that does not get discussed at these projects. So this is a still, for example, of one of the videos of how to take the train in Salt Lake City. So this is a stretched out view of the 360 video where you have the interface of how to pay for card for transportation here. This has the locations and the translations in Arabic. And the video is about 3 minutes of how to say take train in Utah in the process. So we have this both in translated mode, and then some videos we have no language, so we can serve more refugees in the process. So again, technology essentially helping people is a big facet of this. Right now, the project, we've done it, we're on break until August, but I'm very excited to announce that we're going to be working with the medical school. So we are going to be making videos, 360 videos for how to go to doctor, how to go to emergency room, how to go to urgent care, specifically for refugees. And so that'll be shot in August, and we'll probably present that video by September, October. And we're hoping to scale it up. The International Rescue Committee, the Refugee Resettlement Agency, wants us to scale up. So not only in Salt Lake City, but go 5 offices or go nationally. So right now we're looking for money to go nationally for the next year. Yeah. Any questions on that project?
Not this project, but I have some questions about your talk from the beginning. Could I ask you some questions?
Sure. And I'll just I'll just wrap up with the last one because it connects to the maps a little bit, and then I will finish.
Okay.
And just so there's a video for it. So the last project, this is in particulates. This was a collaboration with the incredibly talented Mitzu Salmon, where we went and did some sound recordings in rural West Utah in the Sun Tunnels, which is an art installation, kind of a land art piece from the 1970s by Nancy Holt. And in the process of this, we wanted to look at air quality data. So that remote sensing that I was able to do in Taiwan, I wanted to translate it to Salt Lake City. So we looked at air quality data and essentially figured out a way of doing a performance of getting air quality data into computer and then actually performing using Max MSP, performing with that data. So it's not necessarily a microcontroller, but it's an API or a way of essentially looking at a larger data set than say just one microcontroller. And right now I'm playing around with this. This is an in-process project where there's a record for it. There's the video of it, which will show that actually has the air quality data as sound. And that's it. I'll stop there for the sake of time, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both and everybody else.
Actually, a
question.
No, yes. I'm sorry you didn't show more music because you're a sound worker, sound artist.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We have the videos and that has the music and stuff.
Okay. Because online there's a very famous musician, Taiwan now. He's part of the audience. Pan Yi老师. Yeah. She's one of the best pianists.
Oh, wonderful.
So I'm now going to ask you the first question is about musicology. If I have something wrong, please correct me, Pan Yi 老师, please.
Okay.
Are you still online, 潘老师 I hope she's online. The question is about, in the beginning, you talked about two musicians who influenced you. The first one is Max Matthews,
yeah.
And the second one is Dario Dalla Shahi.
Yes.
Okay. And the first time you talk about his playing, or she's showing some composition of Schoenberg.
Yeah. It's just a photo with Schoenberg in the background. Yeah.
You say that's the difference between the music in United States and the music in Iran. But I just didn't know very clearly about the difference from the music from Iran and from United States. If the music of Western world start from harmony and counterpoint, because Schoenberg just modified something. And what is the key point about the music of Iran?
I would say that the fantastic question. Whoa, Hungry, I did not see that question coming. And I will speak to the best of my art school knowledge there in terms of harmony and counterpoint. I would say with Iranian music,
yes,
it's much more the closest thing to it would be like a fugue, where you essentially have like a motif that you repeat.
Mm-hmm.
You improvise with that, and you build on that, and then it kind of opens up more. And that's called the Radif system. So Radif is the traditional Persian music system. And Daryash Dolat Shahi, he studied traditional music before he made electronic music. So the harmony and counterpoint aspect is not as important with classical Persian music as much as, say, a motif may be in Persian music.
You talk about the sustainability of technology.
Yeah.
I don't really understand what does it mean, sustainability of technology.
Yeah. So great question. And it's something that's come about in the last year. So this is great for us to talk about, Hungi, as collaborators. Sustainability of technology. So sustainability usually comes with like materials or environmentalism, right? That's how the word is usually associated. But sustainability of technology really is speaking of, if you use new technology, how do you keep it going with the technology? Because sometimes technology breaks. Oftentimes technology breaks, right? So finding ways of being sustainable with the technology means, for example, with the refugees, we could use 3D modeling environment, but it might become problematic. But the 360 videos are much more easy to use for refugees. So that's another way that the sustainability of the technology works. So it's really about it's a matter of the longevity, or how long the technology can be used. That's the sustainability in technology aspect.
Marvelous. Because technology sometimes become one of the biggest trash.
Very quickly. Yes, I know.
Yes.
Yeah, I think about upgrading too, like how you have to upgrade, and then your previous technology is no longer, you can't even use that anymore. You have to upgrade, and then it becomes, like you said, trash.
You just show that way.
Exactly. So the sustainability in the projects it's a big part of it. And also from working with some collaborators on the East Coast, a lot of times with technology projects, you have collaborators who come and go. So working with technology, we're like, how do I keep project going if nobody wants to do technology project? So that's another aspect of the sustainability. But the upgrade is important. Like, I have an iPhone 11. It's in 2 or 3 years, it's going to be not useless, but I will think it's useless, right? So this is a very unsustainable platform of technology.
Yeah, exactly. But also, I think it's quite the same like contemporary art. Because every time they prepare a lot of material to present an art for exhibition, and then they just throw away. It's not it's not sustainable. Okay, final question. It's about Wilson. Is that the Wilson? The Wilson of botanist, anthropologist, the Wilson.
Oh yes, Wilson. Yes. Our old friend Wilson. Yes.
Well, marvelous. Thank you. I think next time you should present your artwork in the middle of the forest. That will be marvelous.
Oh, in the middle of the okay. That's not a question though, Hangi. That's a suggestion, and we will take it. Sounds great.
Thank you. That will be all my questions.
Yeah.
I'll ask other students. Do they have any questions? 有没有其他同学有问题的？那个要提出来问的。
Somebody asked, "What is LiDAR?"
Okay.
At 11:54, somebody asked, "What is LiDAR?"
是。
老师，那个是我留言的。那个是我留言的。对，就是因为刚刚那个老师，你中间不是有被问到说，就是什么来光学
那个
雷达那个部分
3D scanner 那个时候。
对，那个就是有点像是逆向工程的概念，就是有点雕塑，然后逆向工程这样。
空间会回溯回来它的那个所有的资讯这样子。
对，我只是在回应那个部分。
是。She's mentioned about the 3D scanning, the soundtrack of all the spaces, I think. But the work of the concert hall look like the Phantom of the Opera, because when people speak with the dark light, it really look like a Phantom of the Opera. Sorry. Okay.
I wish. Yeah. No, the 3D scanning, I can really quickly show for this person. So there's a few different types of. So actually, this gentleman here, he lives in Taiwan now. He's from Hong Kong, but lives in Taiwan, and he has a company called Mass Form. They do a lot of architecture fabrication, but he's using this 3D scanner, which essentially is two infrared lights that go at a 45-degree angle. And then this one is the LiDAR scanner, like so. And the LiDAR scanner essentially is a laser. Say if we have this water bottle, there's a laser here that spins inside and it has a mirror and then spins outside, and it gets all of the points of the laser back into computer. And then that's how you get 3D model.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even though I don't really understand, I just pretend that I understand.
I want to bring LiDAR to Taiwan if I can.
Okay, thank you. 有没有其他同学有其他问题要问的？好吧 I think we can show the video now.
Okay. Well,
thank you, because it's really a long time. It's already 11:35.
We're doing well. So we'll show two videos and we'll call it. So I will show Standing Nymph and Man, and then we'll show Mitzu Salmon's Desert Turtle.
Okay.
I have the videos here, so I will play them. And if there's any issues, just speak up, like if not, but I'll just go full screen video on my computer.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
I'll disappear now.
Me too.
各位同学，现在就是他们的报告已经结束了，所以他们现在要播放2个，就说那个录像的作品这样子。那就播放完之后，我们今天的那个演讲就到这个地方，差不多这样。好，那就谢谢各位同学。那如果你们想要看的话，我觉得他们作品还蛮精彩的，我们可以就看一下他们的作品。就那个2个作品，一个是应该是他们有合作的，还有个人的作品这样子。好，谢谢各位同学。我倒是希望你们留下来看的，蛮精彩。
on the night when we've had that blizzard, when the cars were stuck on the Lakeshore Drive. I was all night long in this building. Every possible door was shaking and some of the windows broke. But I was still here, and I understood that the building will keep me safe. I couldn't go home that night. And so that's what this building is about. And I work here very many nights. I worked probably 18 years at night when I was by myself on the floor, and I was never afraid. It could be 15 years ago when I saw that light. I work afternoon shift and I left my studio 1027, and when I was on the corner by 122, I saw that green kind of light, huge light in the size of the columns we have. And those columns, they are in front of the elevators. So I saw it and I just stopped walking. Then I went very slowly towards that light, and each time I made a step, the light was getting smaller. So finally, in about 5 minutes, when I reached the banisters on 10th floor, that light shrank to the size of the feather. And so I bent down and I wanted to lift the feather, and it disappeared. So I saw it with my own eyes, and I'll never forget. walls are also energy. So the energy is present, see what has been presented, what had happened. And we might not know what happened in 1900 or earlier, like the building has been rebuilt and the 2 more floors was added to the previous building, right? That's the 8th floor, and then the 2 more floors happen on the top of the 8th floor, and there is no document saying how was the 8th floor looked at that time. They demolished everything and they built 2 more floors, and that's when the penthouse happened above 10th floor, and the building was taller because of this addition. I just saw some lights in the theater recently, about a month ago, and I took pictures of them, and that's how it was. Yeah. I've never felt scared or afraid, or I always felt very comfortable, in peace. The theater appreciate my work to be done over there because it was covered with tons of dust. And so one chair by chair I was cleaning them, and I was very comfortable. And when I finished my work, I wasn't even tired or sweaty, because that theater as a space gave me comfort. So if it feels the same way about the entire building, people which are coming to the building are having comfort.
This is Utah.
This is Mitzu's, yeah. Is there sound now?
No. Yeah, the sound comes now.
Okay. We'll just play it then.
Okay. Thank you.
And I thought I heard, and I thought I heard a rustle in the wind, a rustle, take me in, a rustle, waiting for you. A rustle, take me in, a rustle, I begin. Nothing else could make us. I found a way, I found a way. I found a way, a way. I found a way, a way. I heard a rustle, I heard it sing, I heard the ground beneath me sing. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon to this performance, Desert Turtle. I know it's really hard to get to, and GPS doesn't take you here, and some of you had to go off-road, and then you took a left too early. So I'm sorry about that. And I'm sorry for the people who are texting me right now who I can't answer and who can't find this road. But those that came, thank you so much for coming. Actually, that's not right. You are watching this on Zoom. And you didn't really have to go very far. You just turned on your computer and logged into the code. Maybe you're watching it in your bedroom or your living room. In a way, I guess it was hard to get here because so many things you could see on the internet, so many performances happening live and pre-recorded that you could be watching right now, so many sitcoms that you could rewatch. so many YouTube tutorials, but you chose to be here right now with me. So thank you. Creosote bush, Lariar tridentata, gobernadora in Mexico. It's Spanish for governess due to its ability to secure waters by inhibiting the growth of nearby plants. Jackrabbits are the only animal who eat creosote bush, and only when no other plants are available, because its leaves are so bitter. And now creosote bushes are kind of like starter dough in the sense that, right, there's this main sourdough starter that who knows how old it is, and then it creates more sourdough. And the creosote bush, when it grows older, the oldest bushes eventually die and its crown splits into separate crowns. This normally happens when the plant is around 90 years old, and eventually the old crown dies and the new one becomes a colony from the previous plants, composed of many, many separate stem crowns, all from the same seed. The king clone creosote ring is one of the oldest living organisms on Earth. It has been alive for an estimated 11,000 years and was located in central Mojave Desert. Native Americans in the Southwest, such as the Mojave tribe, believe that the creosote bush was used to treat maladies such as tuberculosis, chickenpox, and snake bites. The Mojave Desert originates from the Spanish word, and the Mojave tribal nation is a shortened form of Hama Kave, which means besides water. Water, water, water rights. One of the longest running water rights cases involved the Mojave tribe. Would you like some tea? I have creosote bush, which is pretty bitter, or I have matcha shade-grown green tea. Turtles. Turtle is a general term for turtles. Tortoise is a term for turtles on land. Desert turtles, desert tortoises, much like the tea that you are drinking, are primarily shade grown. They like to spend the majority of their time in the shade. About 98% of their life is spent underground, coming out in the spring to mate and in the summer to lay eggs. They like to go into their burrows of 3 to 9 feet long, underground. When my mother lived in the Mojave Desert, some of her neighbors had their second homes underground. They had their first homes, and then they built their second homes underground, in case of a nuclear blast. Nuclear blasts were moved underground, which it was realized that those above ground were dangerous to the general public, so they moved the testing underground. Perhaps you've seen pictures of the Nevada testing sites, and the craters that were used to test these bombs look like they're craters from the moon. But moving the testing underground did not necessarily make it safer, because the soil would mix with the radiation and the toxins, and when the wind would come, it would blow those toxins downwind. Downwinders is a name for those people who are affected by this in St. George, Utah. Hibakusha. Hibakusha is the word in Japanese for the people affected by radiation and the atomic bomb. Japanese. I didn't grow up speaking Japanese. My mother, even though she was born in Japan, she doesn't speak much Japanese because when her family moved to the United States, they spoke English. My grandmother told me of a story of a teacher who came to their home and asked them to speak English to their own children, even in their own home, but my mother doesn't recall this. The desert is thought of a place to pass through on the way from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, pass through truckers passing through, pass through and extract the gold rush, water. Cadiz is a company now currently trying to take what little water there is from the Mojave Desert and bring it to Los Angeles. The indigenous community is fighting this because they have cared for these waters for centuries upon centuries. My friend Blanca puts it beautifully when she says, some people come to the desert to escape, and yet others come and they disappear. Escape, tourism, music festivals out in the Mojave Desert, ayahuasca trips, off-roading, disappearing at the ICE detention centers at Apple Valley, disappearing at the former internment camps of Manzanar, disappearing at the military bases that my grandfather worked for. My grandfather was born in Hawaii, Japanese American, and then went to Japan to occupy it as part of the American forces, met my grandmother, had my mother and her brother, and then moved back to the United States in Barstow in the Mojave Desert. He inspected safety for the military there. When my mother, she would go out to the desert and she'd see a turtle, she fell in love because the turtle, much like her, had its home on its back. its home on its back and would bring it with it wherever it went. In Japanese culture, there's a saying that the turtle represents heaven and earth, its shell, the vast sky, and its body, the body of the earth. There is a saying, a turtle cannot race the traces of its own tail, or rather, traces that erase traces, leave traces. But Japan is very verdant, and you don't really even have to think about the landscape because it's just poured into your eyes. When we moved to the desert, it was the total opposite of Japan. At first, it felt like there was nothing there, because if you looked one direction, it would be totally flat, and it felt like you could look forever, and it was all empty. You looked another direction, and it would be hills, some of them cragged, and definitely with gulches. But nonetheless, it looked barren. It's only when you get down really low, like on bent knees, or even lying on your stomach, and looking at the life where the sands are, that you notice that it's very full of life. Desert turtle, desert tortoise. Desert tortoises are an indicator species, and they are also endangered. I was reading in the guidebook for the Mojave Desert that if you see a turtle, not to pick it up, because its bladder has a year's worth of urine. You know, that's how it's able to stay hydrated. And if you pick it up, it will pee, and it will perhaps die of dehydration. So don't pick up a turtle if you see it. It's holding its water. Driving along, driving along, driving along, driving along, driving along, driving along. How do those truckers drive for so long? How do they hold their bladder for so long? Driving here, I haven't really ever driven this far before. And when the wind comes at you, You're just trying to hold the car just so you don't get off road. I glanced over my left after there was a long delay, and the woman's car had flipped over. But she seemed okay, and she's holding this huge blue stuffed animal. She wasn't a child, she's probably in her 40s or 50s, and the car was completely turned over. And I was just driving with the wind and thinking, that could be me. I got to slow down, just get behind this truck and go real slow. Real slow. When we left Japan, you were beginning to, it was impossible. I didn't care if you were in the US or if you were in Japan. Photographs were really coming out fairly regularly about what happened to the survivors, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Of course, I grew up. My parents did not keep anything from me. They didn't hide newspapers or magazines from me. I was always available. And so I knew what kind of devastation it created. I'm talking flattened, entire cities gone. And so then I'm in the US. People were building bomb shelters. We had the duck and hide exercise, which meant that if we heard a siren, because they were drills that we did, if we heard a siren, we had to go underneath the desk and put our hands and arms over our head. And I always thought, this is ridiculous. You have an atomic bomb hit you. Chances are it's really not going to do much. I didn't even see it coming. I didn't see it go away. I didn't see myself. I didn't see you. I didn't know where to stay. It kept going away. It kept going away. I didn't even see it coming. I didn't even see it go. Definition of aridity. A desert is where the evaporation outnumbers the precipitation. where the wind is louder than a few birds. It is a space of possibility, but to some that just means a place to shoot loud guns or test hydrogen bombs. But for others, it is a place to dance, and for others, a place to play. It's become a symbol of freedom in the American landscape. But the desert, how to put it? If you see a Japanese American body in the desert, or rather, if I do, I think of confinement, internment camps. My family was not interned. They came to the US after that, in the 1960s, or rather, it's a little bit more complicated than that. But the desert is where they landed. A desert has less than 10 inches of rain a year. Yokohama, dense, tropical, humid city. From that to a barren desert. My mother arrived at age 8. Her brother, mother, father, and her. Her father inspected safety for the military. And as far as she knew, they were the only Japanese in town. Go as far as you want, just make sure you can see the house, her mother yelled. My mother pressed her face against the dirt, held the lizard. It wanted to run away, but she was not finished petting it. So as the creature ran away, she grabbed what she could, the tail. The tail came off. The tail came right off. She cried and cried, holding this tail in her hand. Much later in life, she found out that lizards grow back their tails and that for some reason, this gave her solace. The idea to reinvent, to grow after damage. The present-day surfaces of the Mojave have not been formed by volcanic upheaval, but rather movement of particles across the landscape, erosion, transportation. Watching Niles, the science guy, he explains erosion by sanding the rocks down and down through millions of years. I return to the house of my mother in Barstow. A young boy goes to the truck of the car. I am a spy with a camera, videotaping the house, which used to be surrounded by dry, vast landscape, but now it is held by other suburban homes. It is slightly disappointing, as if I cannot picture her there or my grandmother, laying in bed shocked by the change. No one who knows her language, unable to cook, unable to do much, so it falls on my mother. Where to go when I would be. I didn't even know the why, but they took me astray. I was just tripping on the trees. I was just rolling on the sand, melting away. Sinking right in, sinking right out, taking my time, not knowing how to shout. away. I was just trying to find the path sometime today. I looked down and I saw the sand just crawling over me. There was a tortoise, 3,000 years old, with her home on her back, with her home on her back.
Bravo. Feel like a Tarantino's film, a road movie.
What is it? I hope there was sound for that one.
Yeah, totally.
Great. Good,
yeah.
good. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is almost the end of the talk already. And I'll ask students if they have question.
Sure.
The answer can, and then we can just finish the talk. OK， 同学还没有什么问题要问的吗？今天我们就那个课程讲的差不多，然后现在也时间差不多了，我们最后开放一点时间让大家问问题，如果有的话我们问一下，如果没有的话我们今天就要结束了。那个公益会有问题吗？公益会你写好了吗？公益会 ，You can write in English too.
Whatever is easy. I have Google Translate open, so I can just translate if it's easier for them.
Just writing now. 关于什么？关于 I didn't see anything. 沙漠中的舞踏。This is about the dance in the desert.
What about it?
Yeah, but I see only. 公寓，然后呢？音乐的选择，就这样吗 ？The question is about the dance in the desert. What is the criteria for the selection of the music?
The choice of music.
Yeah.
It was so Mitzu. I mean, Mitzu would answer this better than I would. But she made the music based on improvisations and just essentially making work. So she did it where she would essentially like make the music and then she went on the road trip to make the film. So it was something that she put together at home and then she went there. But the music, Mitzu mainly uses like samples put together, layers of samples together, and that's a big way that she works.
Some kind of like kind of collage or something of music. No.
What kind? Garage?
Yeah.
Collage. Yes, collage. It's definitely it's collage, but it's rhythmic and yeah.
Okay. Thank you. 那个以乌龟去陈述日美人的历史非常杰出。She said to I have French in my mind.
I
to talk about the history of
very
the
outstanding
Japanese American
Yes.
with the turtle. She said it's excellent.
Yeah.
It's a remark. It's not the question.
I will pass the compliment over to Mitzu when I speak to her.
Okay, thank you. But today we see many icons already. It's the pineapple, the turtles, and the orchid. Many things.
That's
Okay.
right.
Thank you. I think we need to take an end now here.
Okay.
It's already
Sounds
3
good. Yeah, I'm gonna go have lunch.
Yeah. Thank you. And you too. You should take a rest. For you, it's 1:37 already in Korea.
Yes.
You must be very hungry. Thank you very much.
I've been secretly eating fruit. It's okay.
Okay.
Somebody else wrote something. I want to make sure. Ecologically, human history. Thank you. Yes, our pleasure.
Okay.
I just translated that.
I'll talk to you later after the talk. So now I have to let you go. I have to free you now already.
Yeah, it was so nice that we were able to hang out with you, even if it is in Zoom or in Google Meet. So thank you.
It's okay. Thank you.
And hope to see you before 2023.
Okay.
And thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
And that's my thank you to Mitzu too.
Absolutely. Okay.
Bye bye. Thank you. Bye bye.